The Chosen One is what we are calling this very special show that's coming live to you right here at ET Now. Urjit Patel will be India's 24th RBI governor, and he's somebody who comes with a lot of street credit to his name. His academic record is unblemished, and of course he's been a part of the RBI for 4 long years almost with monetary policy management. So indeed the Chosen One, and who better than the eminent panel that's joining us right here on ET Now to take that discussion forward. We've got Banker Par Excellence Rana Kapoor joining us. We also have a consulting editor Maithili Busnurmat. We've got Arvind Mayaram, the former Finance Secretary of India. We've got Narayan Murthy, a very tall leader from Indian industry. We've got Rakesh Mohan, the former Deputy Governor and whose name was really doing the rounds this time as well. We've got Sadanand Dume all the way from the United States. And of course, we've got Dr. Rajiv Kumar who joins us as well. Thank you each one of you for joining us. And Maithili, the last word in banking to me at ET Now is you. And so let me just begin by talking to you about the choice that has been made. The Chosen One is indeed Urjit Patel. What do you make of that government's choice? Do you believe in some sense that signifies continuity, a smooth transition? Because Urjit Patel is not an outsider. He's an insider, as an insider can be. Maithili.
Oh, well, yes, certainly it does signal continuity of policies, particularly in the all-important area of monetary policy, because Urjit Patel was the main author of the report on which the present monetary policy framework is based. In fact, it's very often referred to as the Urjit Patel Committee report. So certainly there is continuity, and as far as inflation targeting and monetary policy, primacy of inflation targeting in monetary policy is concerned, that will remain. So there is a huge advantage really of continuity. The fact that he is an insider and he knows how the institution operates, that will also be to his advantage. So I think we'll have to wait and see how things pan out, because just to put a small caveat is that the entire idea of inflation targeting is now undergoing a great deal of rethinking, particularly in the context of emerging markets. So I do hope that just because Urjit's name is linked to that report, we don't get bogged down by that, and we are open to new ideas as and when this happens, because post particularly the global financial crisis, the entire field of economics and macroeconomics in particular is undergoing a great deal of rethinking. So while there is the advantage of continuity, I do hope it is continuity with an open mind, Supriya. So that caveat I must maintain.
All right, continuity with an open mind. Thank you very much, Maithili, for your first opening remarks there. But I'm going to take it across to Mr. Rana Kapoor, the Banker Par Excellence, who's on the part of our show as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Kapoor, for sparing time and speaking on the big appointment. He really is the chosen one. I first want to ask you, as a banker who's got his skin in the game, whose life and his business is going to be impacted by the policies that Urjit Patel spearheads from here on, how do you read into this appointment? It took a while for the government to make up its mind. The appointment has only come on the 20th of August, with just about, 14 odd days left for the present incumbent's term to expire. But how do you read into Urjit Patel's appointment?
I think it's a very outstanding decision to get someone who's going to ensure continuity and who understands the nuances of the current challenges and the headwinds facing the Indian economy. Now we are dealing with a situation which has got its own imperatives. It's inflation versus growth, and the sigma of that is to create more growth in the economy. And I think Dr. Urjit Patel is by far the best choice, and the government of India needs to be complimented on this outstanding decision, because we get momentum, we get acceleration, and someone who understands what Dr. Raghuram Rajan did and what needs to be done beyond. So I think it's a very, very good decision, quite akin to Dr. Reddy a few years ago, who had already got baptized in RBI and then moved on to become the governor, because the understanding of Reserve Bank of India, because it's a very, very deep well, it's a very, very holistic institution. Knowing the organization and having the leadership capacity to lead monetary policy as well as administration and Department of Banking Regulation, all of that is a very significant institutional responsibility, and I think it's a very good decision with this backdrop.
It's a good decision indeed in this backdrop. I'm given to understand Sadanand Dume is also live and ready with us all the way from the United States. Sadan, thank you very much for being with us. How is the global community reading into this appointment, considering Raghuram Rajan was a celebrated economist? He's done a class act. He's got big shoes to fill in, but who better than Urjit Patel to do so? How do you read into this appointment, and how is the rest of the global community, you think, reading into the 24th RBI governor at this stage?
So I think it's a good choice. I think the government of India desperately needed to put forward a candidate who had the right credentials and the right credibility, particularly after severely mishandling the Rajan episode by allowing some of the wilder elements in the BJP to go on with this sort of strange nativist campaign. The government has done that. This will signal continuity. It will signal reliability. It will signal the fact that this government is willing to look among a pool of people with wide international experience and top-notch professional credentials, rather than turning to some of the half-baked crazies whose names we saw circulated.
All right, half-baked crazy names. I'm not going to put anyone on the mat here and ask who those names were. The chosen one is Urjit Patel, and he will be the 24th governor of the RBI. But I want to take this across to a very tall leader from Indian industry, and I know I've got voices that are joining me on the show. I'm given to understand Dr. Arvind Mayram is also with us, and so is Dr. Rakesh Mohan. But just hold your thoughts, gentlemen. I've got Narayan Murthy on the phone line with me. And Mr. Murthy, your quick take on Urjit Patel being the next man in charge. The government took its time, but it looks like it has finally made up its mind, and it is going to be an insider, breaking precedents, appointing an existing serving deputy governor of the RBI as the governor, really, looking at that elevation. How do you look into and how do you read into this elevation?
Well, first of all, Dr. Raghuram Rajan has big shoes. He's an iconic central bank governor. Filling his shoes is not easy. Therefore, the government has done a very good job. Dr. Patel has exemplary, academic qualification. He has worked in the government of India. He has been a consultant to RBI, has been a deputy governor at RBI. He has worked with IMF. So he has all the required credentials. He has also worked with Dr. Rajan in monetary policy area. He has authored papers on inflation targeting. So I think under the circumstances, you couldn't have got somebody better than him. Therefore, congratulations to him. Congratulations to Government of India. So we have the right man to succeed Dr. Raghuram Rajan. That's my view.
Dr. Rakesh Mohan, I'm not going to embarrass you by asking questions about how your name was doing the rounds and you perhaps were being considered for this job as well. But at 52, Urjit Patel is again one of the youngest, of course, to be the governor at RBI. But Dr. Rakesh Mohan, do you believe there is a tone of continuity over here? The government took its time, but it looks like they voted in favor of continuity. There is a lot of unfinished agenda that still needs to be done as far as Raghuram Rajan is concerned, and which is why they perhaps wanted somebody who's been a part of all of those decisions and voted in favor of Urjit.
Yes, let me first say that just what you said, that it's a very encouraging point that the government has opted for continuity in the system, which I think will provide confidence both internationally and domestically. I also want to mention one point, which is the other very good thing about this is that this is the first time actually since 1940s, since Mr. C.D. Deshmukh, that a sitting deputy governor has been elevated to being the governor. There have been other deputy governors like Dr. Rangarajan and Dr. Reddy who did become the governor, but they first had to go out of the Reserve Bank before they could be appointed. So I think that this is a very good sign and signal because it is quite common in other central banks for the deputy governors to be elevated to be governor when the time is ripe. Dr. Patel is a very fine macroeconomist, and so I think that hopefully the country's macroeconomic situation will remain under control as it has been for the last 3 years. He also has good both international and domestic experience in that he was with the IMF in the first part of his career, even though it was short. And also that he has good experience in the private sector, working in the IDFC for a number of years, and then with BCG and with Reliance. So that's, again, something unusual in a governor who's had both experience within the public sector or the government as a whole, and in the private sector. So I think that's something that is novel in this appointment.
That's a very good point that you're making, and I do have questions on that as well, but I'm given to understand I have a very special guest joining us live right here. Mr. K.K. Mistry joins us as always with his views that matter here on ET Now. Thank you very much, Mr. Mistry, for being with us. This is an appointment that has perhaps kept the speculation and the rumor mills and all kinds of speculation really alive. What do you make of the choice finally? It is Urjit Patel and the government in some sense voting for continuity. There is a tone of a smooth transition there. How are you reading into Urjit Patel being the chosen one?
No, absolutely. I see this as continuity. Urjit is a very experienced person. I see that he played a major role in the policies over the last few years. And I think it brings some great continuity, and it's a wonderful choice.
It's a wonderful choice indeed, but I must ask you, and I was asking this question to Mr. Rana Kapoor because you really are the two bankers on my show and you've got skins in the game. And so I must ask you the question, inflation versus growth is a big debate whenever it comes to the RBI. Their mandate is price management, price stability. The government has to spur growth is a very simplistic way of looking at things. Do you believe that equation is set to change with Urjit Patel being in charge? The man comes with a reputation. I mean, all the inflation targeting and all the CPI targeting has happened on the basis of his report. How do you see that fine balance being maintained between inflation and growth under Dr. Urjit Patel?
See, I don't think growth is only a function of interest rates. Interest rates can facilitate things a little bit, but that certainly is not the only driving force for growth. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that with the kind of monsoons we've had this year, with the kind of spending that the government has done this year and is in the process of doing in rural areas, and with the pay commission hike, that demand in industry will pick up. And as demand picks up, excess capacity which is there in the system will start getting used up, and that will lead to investments taking place. I don't think investments are going to increase significantly if interest rates come down 50 or 100 basis points. Having said that, I'm sure Dr. Patel will be very concerned about growth also, because growth is certainly one of the things he would look at. But I don't think just dropping interest rates for the sake of dropping interest rates, if there are inflationary pressures in the economy, is by itself going to result in growth taking place.
Mr. K.K. Mistry, I really urge you to stay with us because I want to take that question to Mr. Rana Kapoor as well. And Mr. Kapoor, every time a new governor has been spoken about in the past one odd month or 1.5 months, ever since Rajan decided to return to academia, the question really has been, will there be a man who will relent more on interest rates? Will there be a man who will be far more dovish? Do you believe that view really counts when we talk about Urjit Patel? Because, you know, he's known to be an inflation hawk. He's not somebody who is very comfortable with high inflation. He's known to be a believer in inflation targeting, something that Maithili spoke about earlier. Do you believe there will be this pressure of interest rates on the new governor, given how it's now really going to be done by the Monetary Policy Committee, so to say?
Supriya, my view is that fundamentally that decision making increasingly led by the new governor is going to be vested with the Monetary Policy Committee, as it is done in the advanced world. Number two, the governor will set the pace and the direction, and it'll be very good to see what is the terms of reference. Right now, the main term of reference has been the CPI, and I think there is a school of thought which is building up in India with the intelligentsia amongst the economists and bankers that says that CPI is important, right? Rank 1. But WPI is also important. So you have to take a blended average of the two, which is the GDP deflator. So I think the MPC, under the chairmanship of the new Honorable Governor, has to decide what has to become the anchor for the future policy. Because CPI has 54% weightage of food products, which are not so predicated on interest rates. So I'm from the school of thought maybe from the reform school of thought, which believes that we must give equal weightage to the two. And I would humbly request that this be reviewed going forward. The second point I want to make is that India is a very heterogeneous basket. We are not a uniform like America, and we'll never be as, let's say, dictatorial as China. So in a very heterogeneous basket, you need dispensation for literally sectors in India, and sectors in India that need to be revived to actually solve the twin balance sheet problem of our country, which is the public sector banks, and also at the same time to augment certain installed capacities we have in the country in certain industries that need little bit of a reprieve, and to put them back into full-scale production. So I think there's a full plate for the new governor, and we have to see the ideas. The good thing is that he is baptized, he knows monetary policy, and he knows the current challenges of the twin balance sheet problem in our country. So both have to move together. And the third factor is, hastened, accelerated process of reforms in the banking sector. Some of that has been started brilliantly by Dr. Raghuram Rajan, but we need to step up on the accelerator to create more depth in financial markets in India.
It's an important point that you're bringing to this discussion, and I'm going to take it across to Mr. K.K. Mistry and come to other guests in just a moment from now. But Mr. Mistry, if I may say, it's baptism by fire that Urjit Patel can really swear by at this stage. He's really been there when all of this has been breaking. But the larger question is, an RBI governor always has his platter full, and so will it be for Urjit Patel. According to you, and because at one level, interest rate is going to be managed now by the Monetary Policy Committee, and that's a big relief for this one individual to take that call. According to you, what should be the focus areas for the new governor? What do you think should be his top priorities at this stage?
I would say three things.
Mr. Mistry?
One is continuing with I would say three things. One is continuity of the reforms in the banking system that Dr. Rajan had initiated. In terms of cleaning up of the banking system, in terms of all the different things that he has done over the last couple of years, and of which Dr. Patel was very much a part of. So the continuity heads, that's number one. Number two, whatever we do, we cannot ignore the fact that we have to, at all costs, try and handle inflation. Now, I agree with Rana that we don't talk only of CPI, we have to look at CPI and WPI, because a very large proportion of the CPI inflation is food related, and food prices are not going to increase or decrease just because interest rates go up or down. So I think let's forget looking only at CPI. Let's look at CPI, let's look at WPI. So inflation per se is important. And the third thing, of course, that the RBI governor will have to keep in mind is growth. But growth is not going to come only by reducing interest rates. Growth will come in by creating a lot of facilitating factors, and which are in the process of getting done. And also growth will come in as demand in the country increases, which to my mind will happen, because if you look at the urban economy today is fairly strong. It's the rural economy which, because of poor monsoons in the last couple of years, has been a bit of a laggard. So with good monsoons this year, with government spending, with the pay hike to the public sector pay hike that has taken place, my sense is that demand will increase. As demand for goods and services increases, businessmen will invest more and more. So with a bit of a lag, it is bound to happen. Now it will happen for sure.
All right, Mr. Mistry, I'm going to take this across to Rajiv Kumar. And Dr. Kumar, in one level, the government has broken and taken leave from a lot of precedents here. The first precedent is they've appointed an existing deputy governor of the RBI, elevated him to the rank of the governor. And the second precedent that has been broken is it's no longer discretionary between the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister. The ACC was involved, names were shortlisted, that went to the Appointments Committee, the search committee headed by the Cabinet Secretary did all of that. How do you read into this development? Because at one level, it does dilute the importance of how the RBI governor was appointed, but another level, there are systems that are being put in place. Dr. Kumar.
No, but I think it is the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister who have appointed him. because the FRCC only recommended a set of names, and the choice has been made by the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister. And so therefore the precedent continues. You know, the mandate of the FRCC it does not extend to the selection of the RBI governor. It extends to all other regulators, but not to the RBI governor.
All right. Sadanand Dhume, I want you to come in on that, because there was a lot of speculation about a rocky relationship between the government and the present RBI governor, the outgoing RBI governor, if I may. And then, of course, there was this whole precedence about how deputy governors will be appointed by a committee headed by cabinet secretary, but the governor was supposed to be outside of this. In some sense, do you believe that the government has kind of diluted the whole process of appointing the RBI governor, no longer discretionary? I mean, you know, we do know that Raghuram Rajan was appointed over a phone call, and so was Dr. Subbarao. But here you have the ACC, you've got systems in place. Is that how you will read systems in place, or do you believe the government wants to do away with this whole importance being attached to that one office alone? Every other appointment happens very differently. Sadanand Dhume?
So I wouldn't read too much into the process. I agree with what Rajiv says, that, you know, in the final analysis, this is a very important appointment for the Indian economy, and this is something that the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister decided. They may have sort of, you know, had some kind of different procedure leading up to it. But in the end, I don't think that this is substantively hugely different. I don't think that you can devalue the importance of the job. That is in the nature of the job itself. Though it is certainly true that Raghuram Rajan was somewhat unique because of his very public persona and because of the kind of global reputation he enjoyed even before he took this job. So in that sense, I think we're going a little bit back to business as usual. But the most important thing from my perspective sitting here in Washington was that the government needed to signal to the world that it had faith in the idea of a qualified person with fine credentials that the global markets would look at and feel reassured by. They did that. They've done that well. I think that they have recovered smartly from an awkward situation which was of their own creation.
Oh, absolutely. And they've recovered smartly from one of their own creations. Is a very candid speaking Sadanand Dhume always. But I want to go back to economy, and I want to go back to what Urjit Patel will have to focus on. And Dr. Rakesh Mohan, you've been the RBI Deputy Governor. You know how difficult things are and what a balancing act one has to do. It will really have to be a tightrope walk for the new governor, because expectations from him are that he will also put his weight behind growth while he is trying to balance and rein in inflation, and which is what the reputation that precedes Urjit Patel is all about. It's a tightrope walk that he'll have to walk, won't he?
Well, I think all central banks, even though they may be inflation targeting, give significant attention to the growth issue. The Federal Reserve of the United States does that on a pretty explicit basis, in fact, as part of their objective function. The performance of what the major central banks of the world have been doing, that is the European Central Bank, the Japanese Central Bank, the Bank of England, in the last 7 years since the crisis, that they've all been very focused on getting growth back. And of course, this is in the context of inflation being very low in the world in any case. But all of these central banks, despite being explicit inflation targeters, except for the Federal Reserve, which of course has a dual mandate, have been as concerned with growth. So I would imagine that Urjit would give as much attention to growth as it does to inflation. But price stability is always the first priority of a central bank.
Dr. Rajiv Kumar, you know, like Dr. Rakesh Mohan was pointing out there, that he will give as much precedence to growth as much to inflation, and that is a utopian world and utopian expectation that we will continue to have. But if I may ask you a very frank question here, and you know, this is really the question that I'm asking on inflation versus growth to you. How easy will it be for him to make that fine balance? Because remember, things changed at the RBI after his report. He wanted inflation targeting. He spoke about targeting CPI as the benchmark of inflation. How easy will it be for him to now throw his weight behind growth, which is really the big expectation out of the new governor?
I think he will have to he'll have to really modulate his position. I'm sure he will learn to modulate his position. Being known as an inflation hawk carries credibility, but it's not the only thing. And in our country, at this point of time, growth and much more than growth, even employment generation are the key, are the critical aspects. And therefore, I am really hoping that Urjit will see to it that this balance is well maintained. I want to focus here on the food inflation aspect of it, because I'm sure Urjit recognizes that food inflation is not amenable to monetary policy instrumentality. And therefore, what I'm hoping is that he will work very closely with the government to remove the supply side constraints so that the food inflation can be brought under control. And once that's done, that balance can be restored very easily, and also I think it can be sustained over the next years. That is the key.
Maithili, I want to come to you, and I then want to take it to Mr. Rana Kapoor, because both of you will give me the perspective that I need on this subject, and that's interest rates. That's the relationship between the government and the RBI. And Maithili, let me put it as bluntly as I can. Raghuram Rajan was a UPA appointee, and which is perhaps why a lot of people believe there was this rocky relationship between Mint Street and North Block in his tenure. But what about Urjit Patel? He is going to be this government's own appointee. Of course, he's got a 3-year term. But my question to you largely is, do you believe there's going to be more smooth, more meeting of minds of kinds between North Block and Mint Street at this stage?
Well, not necessarily, Supriya, because even though Raghuram Rajan was a UPA appointee, the NDA government continued with him when it came to office. So it is, by and large, the governments have respected the office of the governor, and they have not made an issue of whether who has appointed the governor has not been a consideration. Of course, to the extent that Urjit Patel has been working with the present government, should be some source of comfort. But by and large, if you see, governors, once they enter the Reserve Bank of India and sit in the seat of the governor, they take a different perspective from what they had done, with classic case being that of Dr. Subbarao, as he himself put it in his book, that he saw things quite differently when he was the helm of the Reserve Bank of India than when he was finance secretary. So I don't think the fact that he's been appointed by the present government will materially change his position or the nature of the relationship between the government and the Reserve Bank of India. But there is a certain familiarity, having worked with the present government, so that should perhaps come to his aid.
Should come to his aid. I was going to ask about focus areas and all of that next, but I think I will ask the questions that have been doing the rounds. And Mr. Kapoor, it's a little uncomfortable as a banker to answer that question, but I still must ask that question. As far as NPAs are concerned, the rising levels of toxic assets that some of our banks are reporting on their balance sheets, of course, a function of a slow economy and also a function of decisions that have not been taken. But yes, NPAs has been an issue. And Governor Rajan almost waged a war against high levels of non-performing assets. So much so that banks are crippled today, they say, to do anything with credit offtake. My question to you is that because Urjit Patel has been a part of the decision making, does one believe he will be as much of a wage warrior against NPAs, or do you believe there could be certain softening of stance here?
Supriya, it's a very significant question and a very significant mandate that Government of India has given the new governor. And the good thing is he's a practicing economist, what I like. 2, he's seen the ups and downs and the cycles which have been very severe, not only the global crisis, Eurozone, India's own crisis, China's own implications, so on and so forth. The fact of the matter is that the twin deficit problem, the twin problem of strained balance sheets in our country is very much still a very persistent issue, and that will require to reduce the economic cost of funds in our economy. And to me, that should be something which should be pivotal to the new governor, to the new MPC, to understand that what is required is to make sure that our industry, our economy has a soft landing. Yes, inflation is #1 priority, but equally the priority today and imperative in the economy is to make sure that our industry is protected. And our industry today warrants lower real rates of interest and possibly needs a new policy anchor. And in my judgment, and I made this point on your channel earlier, is a blend of the CPI and the WPI, and we need to navigate a new anchor rate which is a good weightage, and that good weightage is with the GDP deflator. So when you look at the GDP deflator, that is driven by consumption, which is 66% of our GDP pie, and 36% is driven by investment. So when you look at that blend minus imports, you realize that the deflator can catalyze and reflect the true report card of our inflation economy. So I think the weightage has to be given by the new governor and the new MPC on what should be the anchor, because CPI, I think, has been a very significant shift in the pendulum from WPI, and we are lost, therefore, on interest rates, as a consequence of which the overall cost of funds of the economy has really gone up dramatically. Whether it's the private sector or the government sector, I think we need to find a good balance, and I think this should be literally point number one, agenda number one for the MPC.
Just hold your thoughts there, because I want to take the discussion back to the NPAs. And Mr. Narayan Murthy, I know you speak candidly, and so I must ask you, do you believe with Raghuram Rajan gone, the war against NPAs is going to be blunted, or with Urjit Patel coming in, and because he's been a part of this decision making, we will see the same momentum as far as tackling NPAs is concerned, as far as the war against bad loans is concerned? Mr. Murthy.
I think having somebody from inside is likely to result in much greater success in balancing growth and inflation on the one hand. Second, I think cleaning up of banks is another very, very important item on the agenda that Rajan had started. And I have no doubt at all that Dr. Patel will continue the good work started by Dr. Raghuram Rajan. And we couldn't have got somebody better than Dr. Patel. Therefore, I'm very happy.
All right, but I must ask Dr. Rakesh Mohan there. Mr. Patel will also have to continue the bank cleanup exercise, which is really a big legacy of Raghuram Rajan that we've been speaking about on this channel. How big a challenge is that going to be for him to keep up with this momentum, to carry on with that cleanup act, that cleanup drive, if I may? Dr. Mohan.
I would actually go further and say that I think that the biggest challenge, the biggest task facing the new governor, Dr. Patel, is indeed to focus on the banking situation in the country. The deterioration in bank balance sheets that has taken place in the last 4 years or thereabouts, 5 years or thereabouts, is indeed very important to be cleaned up. And so I think that the first item on his agenda really has to be to look at how to get the Indian banking sector back in shape. And I think that there will have to be some innovation, there will have to be some new thinking, there will have to be some out-of-the-box thinking. And I'm sure that Urjit will focus on that, because he has been in the Reserve Bank for the last 4 years, 4.5 years, and that he's very aware of all these issues, and that he will continue the process. But I think there will need to be some significant innovation in dealing with the issues so that we can get credit flowing in the country as fast as possible.
All right, so the word coming in from a former deputy governor is that it has to be item number one as far as the cleanup exercise is concerned. Dr. Rajiv Kumar, I know you have a view on how NPAs have been managed and how they are under attack, and rightly so, from the government and the RBI. But I know you have a view and you would have wanted it to be a little differently. But do you believe Dr. Urjit Patel can keep up with the momentum that Dr. Rajan did show? And should he?
Well, I'm not so sure whether that continuing with that momentum would be the best thing. You're talking about you're talking about banking balance sheets, right? Bank balance sheets. Yeah, but I think you need to take a longer term view, as some people like Dr. Kelkar and others have said. You have to view this in the business cycle context. And I think it will be better for Urjit to take that kind of view rather than sort of insist on a very short term and an urgent cleaning up, because there is merit in differentiating between the stock problem and a flow problem, and tackling the flow first and then going after the stocks, so that the economy can be revived and the banks can get much greater confidence in extending the credit that is required for the industry.
Sadanand Dhume, it's time to talk frankly, and it's time to call the spade a spade, and which is why I urge you to do that, because no discussion on NPAs can end or will end unless we talk about the crony capital angle to that. And a lot of people believe that the crony capitalists got the better of Raghuram Rajan as he did what he did with NPAs. Do you believe Urjit Patel needs to be a little more cautious here, or do you believe he should show the same gumption and will indeed show the same gumption, because he's been a part of the decision making? It wasn't just one man's decision alone.
Yeah, I mean, I think to be fair to the new governor, we've got to give him time before judging him on this, right? We're going to be able to see within a year or so whether he's going to be, whether he's going to take a slightly different approach or not. The more important thing is that what do we know about him going in? And what we know about him going in, that he is that he's an inflation hawk. That's a good sign. We know that he has the confidence both of the government and of the outgoing governor. That's also a good sign. I wouldn't want to speculate on what his position would be, but it's certainly true that this is something that people will be looking at closely to see whether, in political terms, this should be interpreted as going slow on so-called crony capitalists or not. But I think it would be unfair of the new governor for us to kind of prejudge where we think he's going to go on that.
It's unfair to prejudge, I agree with you, but the expectation really, and the speculation has been rife that, and Sadanand, I'm going to follow up that question with you right here, because I think the speculation really is that that huge war against NPAs is perhaps going to be a little softened. Do you believe Urjit Patel is going to be the man who will do that? Or do you believe he's going to stand his ground and say nothing doing? I'm going to carry on.
Let me just put it this way. It's certainly true that Urjit Patel will not carry the same kind of club. He wouldn't have the same kind of bully pulpit as Raghuram Rajan, which allowed him to operate outside of the parameters because of his huge global reputation. I think Urjit Patel, though he's a respected economist, will not have that. Therefore, I imagine that the government will feel a little bit more confident that they'll have an RBI governor who is more on their page, regardless of what that page is going to be.
Fair point indeed. Mr. Rana Kapoor, I want to bring this back to you, and we must talk about the global investment community. And here is Urjit Patel, a man who has a very, very, very impressive academic record. He's also got a reputation as far as macroeconomy and monetary policy management is concerned. Here's someone who comes with plenty of global experience as well, given his stint at IMF. How do you believe investors should be reading into his appointment? I mean, the RBI governor, let's not lose sight of the fact, also does monetary policy management. He's responsible for forex, exchange rate, and all of that. How do you believe global investors are going to react to this appointment?
Supriya, I think the receptivity to this appointment because of the continuity factor, the business as usual factor, his credentials, the fact that he is known globally and locally, to me means that this is a very good decision by the government, and you will see it probably spark, the confidence back as far as, regulatory management is concerned, because this was a big gap in the last 3-4 weeks. I think this is a fantastic decision for continuity for someone who has equally good credentials as the outgoing governor. Point number 2 is that the fact of the matter is the experience on the job is exceedingly important, because anybody new who comes in this job in the hot seat takes at least 6, 9, 12 months. No matter how brilliant you are, it takes you a while. And the third thing is economics is a very significant part of the job. But please remember, you're managing the government's treasury, you're managing banking regulation, you're managing banking supervision and reforms, right? So there are 3 or 4 assignments the governor has, and which require a lot of administrative strengths as well, beyond economics. So economics may be the headline point, but the other aspects of leading a very able team of deputy governors and executive directors of Reserve Bank of India, and there are so many of them who are extremely well qualified, that resonance, that leadership tenacity to manage them and to empower them and to give them the authority to make decisions and give them that freedom is also very, very pivotal. So I think recognition of the in-house system of Reserve Bank of India, like Dr. Reddy knew the system and everybody was empowered in his regime, will be very, very important aspect of the new governor's role because of his familiarity with the system.
Dr. Rakesh Mohan, I'm going to come to you because I do want to take this across to Maithili, talking about the being an insider and how much that helps. But Dr. Rakesh Mohan, very quickly, how do you believe foreign investors are going to respond to this, considering his international experience does count a lot? I mean, whether it was a stint at IMF, and like Mr. Kapoor was saying that, and I think that's a very valid point here, that it's not just monetary management that the RBI governor does. He does a lot more. He's the regulator of banks. He does inflation targeting right now. So, I mean, there is so much more that the RBI governor does. How do you believe the international investor community that was keeping an eye on the RBI governor's appointment is going to react to Dr. Urjit Patel?
Well, first, I think that we should give as much importance to domestic investors as foreign investors. And I think that the markets will essentially react on how he performs. Given that he has been there as the person in charge of monetary policy in the last 4 years, and the markets have been relatively happy with the performance of the Reserve Bank, I would imagine that they would be happy they would react positively to his appointment.
Maithili, you've been an insider at the RBI, and I so must ask you the question, like Mr. Kapoor was pointing out there. Does being an insider help somebody in this job? I mean, he's been at the RBI for almost 4 years now in his capacity as deputy governor, and of course, previously he was one of the OSCs. My question really is, does it really help to know the ropes within the RBI? Does it help to be an insider as you get that big job?
Well, it certainly helps because we know the institution. But let's remember, Supriya, that the RBI is what one would call a full-service central bank, because apart from monetary policy, it does a very important part of it is macroeconomic stability and financial stability. Now, Dr. Patel has worked he's been mostly responsible for monetary policy formulation, and that is an important part, of course, but it's only a part of the RBI's functions. So I think it would be important to see how Dr. Patel learns the ropes. I'm sure it's not a question so much of learning the ropes, but also of managing the other two very important aspects of the RBI's function, financial stability, macroeconomic stability, and both these are very, very important. So while it helps to know the system, the fact is that he's been largely specialized in one area. He will need to kind of broaden his approach to the other areas as well. And it's also important that now that he has become a governor, the post of one deputy governor who would be in charge of monetary policy opens up. Now, the MPC consists of the governor, the deputy governor in charge of monetary policy, and the third person has already been named, Michael Patra. So it will be interesting to see who the government names as the deputy governor who will be in charge of monetary policy. So that also becomes a significant thing. So as I said, being an insider helps, but you need to have a much greater knowledge of many other aspects. And though Dr. Patel has been part of the insider and he would have a fair knowledge of all these things, he would need to have greater familiarity with the other aspects of RBI's functioning as well.
That's an important point, how the composition of the RBI is also going to change, because Dr. Patel moves on as the governor, and of course the monetary policy deputy governor position does open up. But Dr. Rajiv Kumar, I must ask you this question about Dr. Patel having prior private sector experience, whether it was IDFC, whether it was BCG, whether it was Reliance Industries. This is also unprecedented of sorts. He's perhaps one of the first few governors who's coming with private sector experience. Dr. Kumar, my question really is, does that make him a person better suited for a job in today's world, in today's reality?
I'm very much hoping so, and I think Urjit will provide that. Urjit will, I think, have. The only thing is that he'll have to blend his industry experience along with his technical expertise, and in some sense round off the edges which he might have developed over the years, because that's what you need as the governor of RBI.
Mr. Kapoor, I want to bring that part about the private sector experience to you before I take it to Sadhana and Dume to talk about the Indianness of Urjit Patel. But Mr. Kapoor, the question really is, like Dr. Kumar was saying, that it helps at this stage to understand the private sector. And I think Dr. Patel, in that sense, is perhaps one of the first few governors who has private sector experience from IDFC, BCG, Reliance Industries. Do you believe that's something that will add or its advantage Urjit Patel, because he has that? He will perhaps understand issues in the private sector a lot better than some of his predecessors have?
Supriya, I think you hit the nail on the head, that today we have a practicing economist as the governor of the Reserve Bank of India. That is a moot point in my judgment, and I compliment the government of India for making such a fine choice. Number 2 point is, if you see that the real precipitation today in India's economy, and when you analyze the economy, is really in the private sector, because the public sector is improving dramatically under good governance of the new government in terms of quality of public spending. But the private sector's rejuvenation and the resurgence of the private sector is vital. So understanding and appreciating as a practicing economist the challenges of the private sector and what is required by way of sectoral strategies, because India, being a heterogeneous country, needs a lot of bilateral solutions. Steel needs a solution, construction and affordable housing needs a solution, and food and agri-business management needs a structural solution so that the economic cost of funds is reduced. So I think his credentials are fantastic, and I think the sector's strategies have to be embedded today. And as I mentioned in my earlier point, that we need to find a good anchor, as in like a good blend of CPI and WPI in the GDP deflator, because to me that's very important. Otherwise, CPI is a little bit elusive in terms of effective monetary management.
Indeed it is, and I think the new boss should be listening to some of that discussion. But let's take this across to Sadanand Dhume. And Sadanand Dhume, I'm going to ask you the controversial question that preceded Dr. Patel from coming in, before he came in, and that was about the Indianness. Is Urjit Patel more Indian than Raghuram Rajan has been in the past? Because he's somebody also with global credentials. Or do you believe Subramanian Swamy has very little to make noises about right now?
No, Subramanian Swamy is not making noise. I think, but this is very clearly, this sort of, nativist argument has clearly been slapped away. This is somebody whose credentials are global: Yale, Oxford, London. He's worked at BCG, he's worked at the Brookings Institution, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that he worked at the IMF as a Kenyan citizen, which Raghuram Rajan was never a non-Indian citizen. I'm glad that the government has ignored this sort of silly nativist ravings and has instead focused on the person's substance, credentials, and capacity to do the job. So they've done exactly the right thing. And I think that the world will be reassured that some of the kind of rhetoric we saw around Raghuram Rajan, which was very unfortunate in the last few months, overly personalized, is not something that has gone into the final decision for when it came to seeking his replacement. Because the worry was that kind of rhetoric and that kind of talk was a signal that the government may turn its back on seeking someone who would be acceptable and who would be respected by the international community. They have not done that, and I believe that the government should be congratulated for that.
But Sadanand, aren't you a little concerned that the rhetoric that happened in Rajan's time could well return in Urjit Patel's? What is going to stop a person like Subramanian Swamy from making the allegations that he did? Because Urjit Patel comes with as much global credential as Raghuram Rajan did.
I don't think it'll happen, and for two reasons. The first reason, of course, is that the Prime Minister very clearly sent a signal in his interview to Times Now saying that he does not believe in this kind of talk. And I think since then, Dr. Swamy has been put in his place. So that's one thing. And secondly, I don't think that the people who were using that ridiculous charge against Dr. Rajan really believed it. It was more a case of wanting to target him and therefore flinging whatever mud they could at him. It's not a principled position, it's an opportunistic position. So even though if you look at it objectively, Urjit Patel is probably just about as mentally fully Indian, even if this weird term means anything, or less than Dr. Rajan. I don't think those people are going to go after him, and it's already been signaled that they're not.
All right, just hold your thoughts there because I've got Narayan Murthy and we're wrapping the show up. I'm completely out of time here, but Mr. Murthy, what's your wish list for the new governor?
No, I think to continue what Dr. Raghuram Rajan had started in terms of balancing growth and inflation. Second, to clean up our banks and make sure that they are strengthened. I think these are two wonderful things that Dr. Rajan had started, and therefore it'll be so nice if Dr. Patel continues these. But, you know, as I said, I'm an outsider. I'm a non-technical person. Only Dr. Patel will know what other agenda items would be there, and therefore whatever he takes up and does, and I'm sure it'll be good for the country. So as an outsider, as a non-technical person, I would cheer him from the sidelines.
You know, I'm really running out of time here, and I will urge both of you to be brief in your closing comments. Mr. Kapoor, I thank you enough for being so patiently standing by and waiting for your turn to speak on the last page. But what is your big wish list for the RBI governor? What are the top 3 things that you would want Urjit Patel to do?
I think Dr. Urjit Patel has the credentials. He's globalized, and he has to build, in my opinion, the elements of what I would like to believe is an inflection point in Reserve Bank of India, inflection point in the Indian economy to build an Indian monetary policy with the elements of India's sensitivities and India's composition of its GDP, and not just have one anchor, but more than one anchor as in inflation and growth management. Point number 1. Point number 2 is that, yes, you know, he's also inherited a carry forward problem, which has been somewhat, I think, identified in terms of recognition, is the twin balance sheet problem in our economy, which needs to be addressed on war footing, which means solve the corporate issues and solve the public sector bank issues, number 2. And number 3, in my judgment, which is equally very pivotal, is to accelerate reforms to build corporate bond markets, to create more intermediation and disintermediation in the Indian economy. We need more product, we need more solutions for the diversity, because the entire economy today is dependent on the banking system. So we need far more product,
right.
You know, instruments, far more new ideas to come into the system to create more diversity. So these are 3 priorities I would like to believe.
Fair point indeed. Maithili, in less than 30 seconds, tell me, what are the things that you will caution Urjit Patel against?
Well, Supriya, the governor of the Reserve Bank of India doesn't have the luxury of focusing on only one objective. There are many balls in the air, and he has to keep an eye on all of them. It's a tough job. He has a tough role to fill, and I just hope that all the best from all of us, and for the country, we need to have a very competent and a good governor in place.
And I'm sure Dr. Urjit Patel is going to prove us all right and be the best governor that we've had till date. But thank you very much, each one of you, for taking time out and joining us right here on ET Now. I'd like to thank my panel, especially Dr. Rana Kapoor, Maithili Busnur Matsadan and Dume, Dr. Rakesh Mohan, Dr. Rajiv Kumar, K.K. Mistry and N.R. Narayan Murthy. We really appreciate you taking time out and joining us this evening. Viewers, thank you very much for tuning in, the one channel that brings you news and views that matter. On a big day like this, when India chooses its 24th RBI governor, the only channel that brings you action as it unfolds. It's been a pleasure being with you.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/etnow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at etnowlive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/etnow.